They dragged her through the town square at dawn, when the fog still clung to the stones like a shroud and the bells had not yet finished ringing for morning prayer, because they wanted God to see what they were doing and agree with it, wanted the mountains to echo their righteousness back to them, wanted every window to open and every child to learn the lesson that a woman who could not give a man an heir was worth less than the dirt beneath their boots. And her name was Ilara, though no one used it anymore, not since the whispers began, not since the midwife shook her head after the third winter and the priest stopped meeting her eyes, and now her wrists burned where the rope bit into, her skin and her knees scraped raw against the stones as the men hauled her forward, shouting words that tasted like rust and rot, barren, cursed, useless, while women stood silent with their hands folded, fear locking their throats tighter than any rope. Because in this town, mercy was a luxury and survival required obedience, and Ilara did not scream, not because she did not feel pain, but because screaming had never saved her before, not when her husband's face hardened with disappointment, not when her mother-in-law spat at her feet, not when the elders decided her body was proof of divine punishment. And as they dragged her past the well, she remembered standing there once, laughing, young and hopeful, believing love could protect her from fate, believing patience could soften cruelty, believing God listened differently to women who tried hard enough. And she wondered dimly if the mountains remembered her prayers, because the mountains had always seemed kinder than people, silent but steady, harsh but honest. And somewhere high above the square, where pine trees cut the sky and the air was thin and clean, a man stood watching, a man the town called the Mountain Man, as if he were a creature rather than a human, as if distance made him less real. And he saw the rope around her wrists, and the way her head stayed, high even as blood streaked her knees, and something old and dangerous stirred in him, something forged by winters alone and losses unburied, because he knew injustice when he saw it, and he knew the sound of a crowd convincing. Itself it was right. And as the men dragged Ilara toward the post where they planned to tie her and leave her, until shame finished what the rope began, the mountain man stepped down from the rocks, each footfall measured, each breath controlled, because he had not come down to negotiate, and the moment his shadow stretched across the square, the shouting faltered, because even cruelty recognizes strength, and he did not raise his voice when he spoke, did not curse or plead. He simply reached out, took the rope in his calloused hand, and with one clean motion cut it, the fibers snapping like a lie exposed, and for a heartbeat the world went silent, the fog lifting just enough for everyone to see what courage looked like when it refused. Permission, and Ilara collapsed not in weakness, but in relief, the ground rising to meet her as hands she did not expect caught her before she fell, and the mountain man's voice carried like thunder restrained, telling them all that no childless woman had ever caused a famine, that no God worthy of worship demanded suffering as proof of faith, that the mountains did not punish what nature decided, and though anger flared in the men's eyes, none stepped forward, because they saw something in him that could not be dragged. And as he wrapped his cloak around Ilara's shoulders and led her away, he did not look back, because justice does not need witnesses. And if this story moved you even a little, if you believe courage still matters, remember to subscribe, because stories like this deserve to be heard. They said she vanished into the mountains, that the mountain man stole what belonged to the town. That disaster would follow, because mercy always frightened those who benefited from cruelty, but what truly happened was quieter and far more dangerous to their certainty, because Ilara did not die in the cold as they predicted, did not beg forgiveness or crawl back. She healed, slowly, painfully, learning what it meant to exist without being measured by absence, learning that the mountains asked nothing from her except honesty. And the mountain man, whose name was Rowan, though few knew it, did not rescue her to feel heroic or righteous. He did it because once, long ago, he had buried a woman who died believing she had failed the world simply by being born into it, and he would not watch that story repeat itself, not while his hands still worked and his knife still cut. And as weeks turned to months, Ilara's strength returned in ways she had never been allowed to explore, her hands learning to trap and gather, her mind learning that worth could be built instead of assigned. And when spring came early that year, the town below noticed, because lambs were born strong, crops pushed through stubborn soil, and no curse followed her departure. And that frightened them more than punishment ever could, because it meant they had been wrong. And wrongness is the one thing cruelty cannot survive. And when Alara finally returned, not dragged, not bowed, but walking beside Rowan with her head unbroken, the square filled again. But this time no ropes waited, only silence and eyes searching for permission to speak. And Alara gave none. She simply told them that infertility was not a crime, that womanhood was not a debt, that God did not need them to hurt people on his behalf. And some wept, some turned away, some learned nothing at all, but a few listened, truly listened. And that was enough, because change never arrives as a flood. It comes as cracks, and as Alara left again, not in exile but by choice, the mountains seemed closer, the sky wider, and the world a little less cruel than it had been before. And if this story reminded you that humanity still exists even in hard places, if you believe kindness deserves a louder voice, subscribe to this channel, because every story you hear here is proof that compassion is not weakness. It is the strongest rope of all, and it never breaks when cut by truth.